My father told the probate judge I was mentally unfit, and my relatives nodded like they'd rehearsed it in the parking lot, so I went quiet, looked down at my watch, and started a 3-minute countdown in my head. The courthouse smelled like old paper, dust, and burnt coffee that had been sitting on a warmer since sunrise. The fluorescent lights made everyone look tired and slightly sick. My father sat at the front table like he belonged on a magazine cover. Tailored suit, perfect hair, a calm, mournful face he could switch on like a lamp. Behind him, my family packed the benches. Aunts with pursed lips, cousins with their arms folded, people who had eaten my grandmother's cooking for decades, then showed up today to watch me get declared a danger to myself. I kept my hands folded in my lap so nobody could see them shaking. The judge adjusted her glasses and glanced at me. "This is a petition for conservatorship," she said. "Your father is requesting legal control over your finances and assets. Do you understand what that means? A legal leash, a polite cage, a way to make me sign nothing ever again without permission." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, and my voice came out steady. That surprised me. I'd spent the last 2 nights with my stomach in knots, replaying every argument, every guilt trip, every time my father told me I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too unstable to handle anything important. My father's lawyer stood. He was young, sweating through his collar, clutching a stack of papers like they were a shield. "Your Honor," he began, "we have serious concerns regarding her capacity. She is confused, erratic, and a danger to herself. She has a history of panic attacks, therapy, medication. She cannot be trusted with the estate." My father dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief that didn't touch a single real tear. "I'm only trying to protect her," he said softly like a saint. A murmur moved through the benches behind him. My aunt made a sympathetic sound. My cousin leaned in and whispered, "See?" like the verdict was already written. I stared at the table in front of me and breathed in through my nose, slow, quiet, controlled. If I cried, they'd call it proof. If I snapped, they'd call it proof. If I defended myself too passionately, they'd call it proof. So I did the only thing they couldn't twist. I went still. My father mistook my silence for weakness. He leaned forward, voice gaining confidence. "Look at her life," he said, pointing at me like I was an exhibit. "She rides the bus. She lives in a shoebox. She can't keep a real career. She's reckless with money." He didn't mention the credit cards opened in my name. He didn't mention the luxury SUV payment that somehow landed on my credit report. He didn't mention the emergency loan he swore he'd repay the moment his business recovered. He didn't mention how every time I asked for details, he'd sigh and say, "This is why you can't handle things. You get emotional." The judge held up a hand. "Therapy does not equal incapacity," she said firm. "Proceed with financial evidence." My father's jaw tightened for half a second, just a flicker. But I saw it. I looked at my watch again. 2 minutes, 40 seconds. The lawyer cleared his throat and passed documents to the bailiff. "Bank statements, trust summaries, highlighted columns. There has been significant depletion of the estate," he said. "Large wire transfers over an extended period. No fraud reports filed. No corrective action taken." The judge scanned the pages, her expression tightening. "How much?" The number landed in the room like a dropped plate. $750,000. Gasps rippled behind me. I felt eyes on my back burning, judgmental. My father turned toward the benches, grief blooming on command. "She didn't even notice," he said softly. "That's how unwell she's been." I almost laughed. Almost. I noticed every transfer. I memorized the dates. I watched the money leave in neat, confident chunks. That was the point. 2 years earlier, after the funeral, my father had slid a stack of forms across my kitchen table while I was still numb, still moving through days like I was underwater. "Just sign," he whispered. "I'll handle the stress. You shouldn't have to think right now." I signed too fast, too trusting. That mistake didn't end me. It taught me. I requested every security alert, every timestamp, every login record. Then I turned the notifications off on purpose. Not because I was careless, because I needed the pattern to keep going long enough to be undeniable. The judge looked up. "Where did the money go?" I stood. The room seemed to tilt, like the floor shifted under my feet, but my legs held. I picked up my blue folder and walked forward. Not rushed, not shaking. I wasn't pleading. I was delivering. "The money is gone," I said evenly, but it didn't disappear. It traveled. I opened the folder. Every transfer originated from one desktop computer. Same device, same login fingerprint, same IP address, my father's home office. My father shot to his feet. "That's fabricated." I didn't look at him. "The funds were wired into an offshore consulting company," I continued. "The registration lists my father's emergency contact number. The logins match his home network, month after month." The judge leaned forward. The room went quiet in a new way, not waiting for me to crack. Watching him, my father laughed, sharp and hollow. "She's twisting data," he said. "She's always been good with spreadsheets." "That doesn't make it true." His lawyer jumped in too fast. "We have a notarized power of attorney," he announced, holding up a folded document like a winning card. "She authorized him to act on her behalf. She signed this herself." The paper fluttered when he handed it to the judge. I recognized the signature immediately. My hand, my name, from a day when grief had hollowed me out and left me pliable. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. "That document grants access to one account," I said, "for bill payment only. It does not authorize asset liquidation. It does not authorize wire transfers, and it does not authorize self-dealing." My father shook his head, smiling sadly, like I was a child lying about stealing cookies. "She begged me to take over," he said. "She couldn't cope. She was overwhelmed." I swallowed and felt the memory pass through me like cold water. Overwhelmed didn't mean incompetent. It meant grieving. It meant trusting the wrong person. The judge studied the notary stamp. Her pen paused. This document does not confer blanket authority, she said slowly, and it does not explain the destination of the funds. My father's confidence cracked, just a little. Enough for me to step into it. I slid the final packet forward. Deed transfers, loan assignments, lease agreements, an eviction filing stamped that morning. I bought the note on my father's house 6 months ago, I said. Quietly, legally, I also purchased the office building where his business operates. He hasn't paid rent in 90 days. The room erupted. My aunt gasped out loud. Someone whispered my name like a curse. My father stared at the papers, then at me. You wouldn't, he said. Not angry now. Afraid. I already did, I replied. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp. Court will recess, she said. I need to review this evidence. The doors opened before she finished speaking. 2 agents stepped inside. My father turned to me, face pale, searching for something. Mercy, guilt, fear. I checked my watch. 3 minutes were up. The metal cuffs clicked shut with a sound I felt more than heard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was final. My father didn't resist. He just stood there, stunned, like the ground had quietly vanished beneath him. One agent read the warrant in a calm, practiced voice. Wire fraud, identity misuse, financial exploitation. Each charge landed heavier than the last. My relatives froze in their seats, faces drained of color. Nobody nodded now. Nobody whispered support. My father finally found his voice. This is a misunderstanding, he said, turning toward the judge. She's manipulating this. She's always been vindictive. Vindictive. That word used to cut me. Today it slid right off. The judge didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her gaze stayed locked on him. Sir, she said, you requested conservatorship claiming incapacity. What I see instead is premeditation. My father's eyes snapped to mine. Wide, betrayed. You set me up, he whispered. I met his stare for the first time that day. No, I said quietly. I stopped protecting you. As the agents guided him toward the door, my aunt stood abruptly. You can't do this, she cried. He's her father. The judge's voice cut clean through the room. Being a parent does not grant immunity. The doors closed behind them and the courtroom exhaled. Papers shuffled. A clock ticked too loudly. The judge turned back to me. The petition for conservatorship is denied, she said. All accounts will be frozen pending full investigation. You will retain control of your assets. I nodded once. That was all I had left to give. Outside, the hallway buzzed with whispers and sideways looks. My family avoided my eyes, suddenly unsure which version of me they were allowed to believe in. I walked past them without slowing down. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. Same worn blazer, same tired eyes, but my shoulders were lighter. Straighter. I washed my hands, watching the water run clear, and wondered something I still don't have an answer for. If I hadn't built the trap so carefully, would anyone have ever believed me at all? The weeks that followed moved slower than the courtroom clock, but heavier. Investigations don't explode, they cease. Every day brought another letter, another voicemail, another polite request for documents that felt like reopening, a bruise just to prove it existed. My phone rang constantly. Unknown numbers, locked callers, family members who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly remembered my name. One aunt left a message crying about stress and embarrassment. A cousin texted that I had gone too far and ruined the family. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody apologized for sitting behind my father while he called me unstable. I stopped answering. The bank accounts were frozen, but my life wasn't. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without jolting awake to imaginary alerts. I took the bus to work like I always had, but it felt different now. Not smaller, lighter, like the word broke no longer had teeth. Federal investigators came to my apartment twice. They were polite, thorough, unemotional. They asked how long I'd suspected. I told them the truth. I hadn't suspected at first. I'd trusted. Then I'd noticed patterns. Then I'd stopped doubting myself. One agent nodded slowly. Most people gaslight themselves, he said. You didn't. My father's lawyer tried calling once. Just once. I let it ring. At night, memories crept in. Not of the money or the courtroom, but of being small. Of being told I was dramatic when I cried. Of being told I was irresponsible when I asked questions. Of being told I should be grateful for protection that always came with a price. I realized something sitting alone at my kitchen table, eating cereal for dinner. The trap hadn't been revenge. It had been clarity. I needed the truth to be louder than his voice. A letter arrived near the end of the month. Charges were moving forward. Asset recovery was in progress. My name would be cleared. Officially, permanently. I folded the letter and set it down, hands steady. And for the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to wonder something that still makes my chest tighten. If my father had never tried to own my life, would I have ever learned how strong it actually was? The first time I saw my father after the arrest was across a scratched metal table in a visitation room that smelled like disinfectant and old regret. He looked smaller, not thinner, not weaker exactly, just reduced. Like someone had finally taken the story he'd been telling about himself and erased the bold font. He didn't apologize. He leaned forward and studied my face as if he could still diagnose me. You always needed control, he said quietly. You get that from your mother. I almost smiled. Even now, it was someone else's fault. Someone else's blood. Someone else's damage. I needed the truth, I replied. You needed my silence. He shook his head slowly. You could have handled this privately. I let that sit between us. Privately meant quietly. Privately meant letting him keep the narrative while I swallowed the cost. You tried to erase me in a courtroom, I said. You don't get to ask for privacy? His mouth tightened. Family doesn't do this to each other. Family also doesn't drain accounts, steal identities, and then point at therapy like it's a crime. But I didn't say that. I was done arguing with ghosts. When the guard signaled time, my father stood too quickly. You'll regret this, he said, grasping for authority like a habit he couldn't break. You don't know what you've set in motion. I stood as well, calm. I know exactly what I set in motion. I said. Consequences. Walking out felt different than walking in. Not victorious, final. Outside winter air cut my lungs clean. I realized how much of my life had been spent bracing for impact that never came. Apologizing for strength I didn't know I was allowed to have. I went home and opened a new account. New passwords. New boundaries. My name finally unshared. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easily everyone believed him. How neatly they lined up behind the version of me he invented. And I wondered quietly if the most dangerous lie wasn't the one he told the judge, but the one I believed about myself for so many years. The restitution process dragged on, measured in spreadsheets and court dates, but something else moved faster. My sense of space, my voice, the way I took up a room without apologizing for it. I found out through a public filing that my father had told people I was cruel, calculated, that I'd planned everything long before the funeral. It didn't sting the way it used to. Cruel was just another word he used when he couldn't control the outcome. My job changed quietly. A manager pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You don't hide anymore." I didn't realize I had been. I started speaking first in meetings. I stopped softening my opinions. When I said no, I didn't explain myself like it was a confession. The office building sale closed without ceremony. The house followed. I never went inside again. Some places don't deserve closure. They just deserve distance. One evening, I opened an old box I'd been carrying from apartment to apartment. Inside were birthday cards from my father, all written in the same looping script. "Proud of you. Always here. Love you." I read them slowly, trying to reconcile the man in ink with the one in court. Both were real. That was the hardest part. A message came through from an unknown number late one night. Just one sentence. "You didn't have to destroy me." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, out of finality. The judge's ruling arrived in the mail weeks later. Assets returned. Accounts restored. My name cleared in language so formal it felt unreal. I held the paper like proof of gravity. Still, there were moments. On buses, in grocery lines, in quiet rooms where the past tried to reassert itself, where a voice whispered that maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have been gentler. But then I remembered the courtroom, the nodding heads, the word unstable used like a weapon. I folded the ruling and placed it in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as a boundary. And sometimes, when I think about how close I came to losing everything, I ask myself something I can't quite answer yet. Was justice what I wanted? Or was it simply the first time I chose myself without asking permission? The day the case officially closed, there was no music swelling in the background, no dramatic phone call, just an email with a subject line that read, "Matter concluded." I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, coffee cooling beside me, and let the quiet exist without rushing to fill it. For years, silence had meant danger. Silence meant he was thinking, planning, rewriting the story in a way that always ended with me shrinking to fit it. The silence was different. This one belonged to me. I went for a walk that afternoon, no destination in mind. The city moved around me like it always had. Buses hissing, people arguing into phones, strangers laughing too loud at nothing important. Life hadn't paused for my trauma or my victory, and somehow that felt right. I passed a courthouse without realizing it at first. Same stone steps, same flags snapping in the wind. My chest tightened, then loosened. Memory no longer had teeth. Just weight, manageable weight. At home, I boxed up the last of the paperwork, statements, rulings, copies of things I no longer needed to prove. I kept one folder, not for revenge, not for fear, just in case I ever forgot how easy it was for people to believe the worst version of me when it served them. My phone buzzed once. A relative I hadn't heard from since the arrest. No apology. Just a careful, neutral question about whether we could talk sometime. I didn't answer. Not yet. Some bridges don't collapse. They just quietly stop being crossed. That night, I stood by the window, city lights reflecting back at me like scattered stars, and thought about the girl who had signed papers while shaking, who had been told she was fragile for feeling pain, who had almost believed that love meant surrender. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't proud either. I was awake, and as I turned off the lights and let the room go dark, one thought stayed with me, steady and unresolved. If everyone who watched me fall had needed a villain that badly, what does it say about them that it was so easy to choose me?